Welcome to today's edition of Feet to the Fire, where we're always challenging the status quo. For more cutting-edge commentary, go to feettothefire.org. That is feet, the number 2, thefire.org. And now your host.
Well, we're picking up right where we left off last time, in the middle of a discussion on republicanism. This is the America Defined series, and we're in part 5. Welcome to the Feet to the Fire program, and get ready to get smarter. Here we're confronting the wizards of smart in our society. We're holding their feet to the fire, the know-it-all profs and historians and judges who misrepresent our country. And we ended our last discussion on republicanism with this statement, talking about the two aspects of Republican government. We said this: republicanism solves the problem inherent to democracy. It brings self-government, there's the first aspect, self-government under the restraint of competitive interests. That's the second aspect, competition. That's the second characteristic of republicanism, stability of competition. The first is self-government, us voting for representatives, and the second is competitive restraint, that no one, in fact, takes over. Republicanism is representation of competing parts or interests. It preserves competition amongst the constituent parts so that no single person or group or entity at any one time gains complete control over the sphere of governing authority. In other words, it prevents the consolidation of power not just in the monarch, but also in the majority, which likewise threatens liberty. Consolidated power, whether in monarch or majority, is quickly corrupted and denigrates into oppression. Well, how does this work specifically? How does competition maintain stability in the republic? The key is in our confederation, our status as independent states. In American republicanism, representation isn't by population only, but also by independent states. Meaning each state has the same representation regardless of how many or few people it has. It isn't just, quote, the state that has the most people has the most say. That would be populism or majority rule all over again. In American republicanism, which is confederated republicanism, there is equal representation for each one of the several states based on the sheer fact that they exist. Best example, think of the U.S. Senate, which has 2 representatives per state, regardless of size or population. See how it makes it as though we literally have 50 different countries with equal and competing voices. Or say it another way, as if the country is simply 50 different people, each with an equal vote apiece. Make sense? It gives the constituent parts equal say, so that decisions aren't based on the majority. They are based on state representation, a state's presence in the union. It goes like this: you want to join the union? Fine. You as a state, your citizens get equal say with everybody else. Hopefully that's clear. This effectively raises the voting power of the less populated states, think Delaware, over and against the voting power of the more populated states, think Texas, which offsets discrepancies in population and prevents the most numerous from becoming the most powerful. In other words, you have stopped rule by majority dead in its tracks. Yes, brilliant, right? What this state representation does is it balances otherwise unbalanced population levels right within the very halls of government. And this is why, for instance, we love the Electoral College and we're never going to give it up. It is Republican in nature, not populist, because it's not based on popular vote. It's based on state representation. And this is also what maintains healthy, stabilizing competition so that absolute power is always just out of reach for anyone and everyone. Think of the plurality of states: northern versus southern, east and west, industrial states, agricultural states, coastland states, mountainous, rural, some are urban. Republicanism pits all their competing interests equally against each other so that no one single entity or group comes out on top. Competition, rather than one state taking over by sheer size of population or influence. That again would be consolidation in the majority or the powerful. And if you still aren't convinced that this would be a horrendous idea, then think of this nightmare. Think direct democracy by state population, and you've got, guess what? You've got California running the country because it has the most people. My goodness, absolute shudders down my spine. No one wants California running the country. Now, right here, I need to quiet the rising and shrill protest of the establishment brainwashed populist who is currently complaining something like this. It's the, quote, "Hey, that doesn't sound very fair" crowd. And you ever notice that that's the best political argument nowadays? It's not fair. That's liberalism reduced to its most basic form. It's not fair. Obama says everybody needs to pay their fair share. It's not fair. The rich have money. Everything's always driven by this notion of what's fair or not fair. And they're whining right now. The populist listening to this is whining right now saying, quote, "That's not fair. Delaware's small. Wyoming's got no people. California's got the most. Let the cities have their voice." Well, I will respond with this. We will take so-called, quote-unquote, unfair, power-dispersing competition over the unstable madness of populism any day. So, go move to a small state if you want. These are the same whiners that are all trying to get rid of the Electoral College. And they run these ignorant TV ads about how the Electoral College isn't, quote-unquote, fair. And it actually is, because it balances power. Even Hillary Clinton suggested back in 2000 that we get rid of the Electoral College. That's a horrendous idea. Okay, so that's republicanism, indirect democracy by competing representation, or dispersing power equally among the governed. But where do we get this grand idea anyway? This is what I want to talk about for just a moment. Where do we get this stuff anyway? A plurality of rulers, appointing men to govern, people representing our interests, rendering judgments for the constituent groups and for the many. Well, here's one place to look. A quick look at biblical history once again. Moses in the Old Testament appointed qualified men over groups of people to govern Israel when they were in the desert. That was in the book of Exodus. It says this in Exodus chapter 18, verse 21. Very fascinating on how they set up basically a political system over Israel. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men, there it is, representation, place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. See, plurality of representatives from a local to a national level who govern the society. That's how Israel did it. Great idea. Founding father Noah Webster cited this when he wrote, quote, "Let it be impressed on your mind that God commands you to choose for rulers," and here it is referencing Exodus, "choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty." And Noah Webster also wrote in his History of the United States, quote, "The brief exposition of the Constitution of the United States will unfold to young persons the principles of Republican government. And it is the sincere desire of the writer that our citizens should early understand that the genuine source of correct Republican principles is the Bible, particularly the New Testament or the Christian religion." All right, that's biblical history. Here's a quick look to political science and philosophical history. Charles Montesquieu, who is a political philosopher from the 1700s, he was a significant philosophical source for the founding fathers. He kind of pioneered and described this idea of the separation of powers that we then employed in our Constitution. He had this to say. Now, this is kind of a long quote and a heavy quote, but see if you can stay with me. He said this, quote, "It is therefore very probable that mankind would have been at length obliged to live constantly under the government of a single person." In other words, man would have stuck with monarchy, had they not contrived a kind of constitution that has all the internal advantages of a republican government, together with the external force of a monarchical government. I mean, and here's what he says, I mean a confederate republic. There it is. This form of government, he says, is a convention by which several petty states agree to become members of a larger one, which they intend to establish. It is a kind of assemblage of societies that constitute a new one, capable of increasing by means of further associations till they arrive at such a degree of power as to be able to provide for the security of the whole body. Wow, that is eloquent. Montesquieu even names our political system specifically for us, Confederate Republic, and then describes it to a T. And how about a quick look to our legal record? The Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and it is considered one of our organic documents. And here's what it mandated. It required a Republican government as a prerequisite for any new state being admitted into the Union. So from the very beginning, our Constitution and our political system required republicanism at all levels of government. So we've got great historical, cultural, legal, philosophical, even religious underpinnings for our system of government. And because of this, and because it is time-tested, we will not discard it so lightly, this political identity that we cherish. We are a confederated constitutional republic. Confederated, which means divided government. Constitutional, which means government by law. And republic, which means representative democracy. The United States of America. Gotta love it. And we will confront and resist any who challenge or misrepresent or threaten our way of life, including and most especially our civil and political heritage. Well, from here on out, now we'll be moving on from these civic lessons to more contemporary issues, but always with this American identity as the backdrop to inform our analysis and perspective. So stay tuned for new programming, but until then, let justice roll down like waters, America, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Stand up, get informed, know your stuff that the public schools left out, and defend your liberty. Listen, it's precious, and it came at a cost, a heavy cost, and it will take some serious effort to maintain. Don't believe the hype out there, and don't be afraid to hold their feet to the fire.